Welcome to the show. Today I want to begin a new series, deviate a little bit from what we've been talking about the last few weeks. We've been talking about Social Security, the decision of when and how you file for Social Security and how important it is, this concept of lifetime income, how important that is to the people going through retirement right now. This generation will be living longer in retirement than they are working. And together with all the different issues of rising medical costs, people living longer, pensions being cut back, all these different factors, lifetime income is absolutely vital. So we've been talking about that and talking about Social Security, Social Security being the largest source of lifetime income that most people have in their life, and really the only source of lifetime income, now that pensions are really not very well done by the employers and phased out. Another statement that I was talking about is that 90% of people filing for Social Security do not receive their maximum benefits. So we've been talking about that and talking about the mistakes, the 3,000 filing rules, the 500 different ways to file. And if you missed any of that, you can go to our website. We actually have the actual broadcast on there. You can listen to the different episodes, the different filing strategies, take advantage of that. Our website is ssmistakes.com, ssmistakes.com. But today I want to shift to another topic, and I want to shift to the topic of college. And this is also one of the favorite areas that I really enjoy teaching on. It's also an area very similar to Social Security, that it's all self-taught. Very early on in my career, I was not aware of the rules associated with different ways that you can reduce college, financial aid, and so forth. Went to college, struggled through that, struggled to pay for that, got out, and actually found out about a lot of these rules. There wasn't any kind of teaching that was involved. It was just something that I began to learn about and decided to learn more about it to help my clients. It's all self-taught, just like the Social Security area. There's not a lot of people out there talking about it. You don't find it in continuing education classes in my business. It's unfortunate because I wish more people knew that. College is a big one. It's an important one. It's actually the largest expense that we ever have for our children. And next to the purchase of a home, it's the largest expense that we have in our lifetime. So really what I want to focus on over the next weeks is basically this process of college. How do we go about selecting? How do we decide where to go to school? How do we determine the most affordable place to go to school? What are ways that we can reduce the out-of-pocket cost through the assistance that's out there, such as financial aid? And I will, as a side note, whenever I do talk about this topic, I do find a little bit of pushback from parents. And I just kind of want to get that out of the way a little bit initially. Whenever I bring up the topic of financial assistance, I will have some parents who automatically think it's not going to benefit them. They think that they make too much money, they have too many assets. That type of information is not going to be helpful for them. And I just kind of want to address that up front. In 30 years of helping parents plan and pay for college, I've actually never seen a situation that was true. I've actually never seen a situation that parents were not able to obtain some kind of assistance. Obviously, some parents will obtain more than others. Everybody has a different situation, and based on their income, based on their assets, they're going to be available. More assistance or less assistance is going to be available. And I get that, but I've actually never seen a situation that somebody didn't qualify for something. So I just kind of say that up front because I just don't want people to be closed-minded with this. And what I usually respond to the parents is that if you think that way, you're really doing an injustice to your children. You're really doing an injustice to your student because you need to be open-minded about assistance, because there's a lot of assistance out there. There's a lot of different ways that you can obtain that and lower the cost of this college, as well as open up a totally different world of different colleges for the student, which is going to be a big emphasis of what we talk about. But over 30 years, I have never seen a situation that someone did not qualify for something. People also sometimes think that what they're going to qualify for is not worth the effort. That's not true either. In my opinion, I've never seen a situation that what people did qualify for did not justify the time involved, and there is time involved. I know there's paperwork. It can be a very frustrating process, but again, I've just never seen a situation that wasn't worth it for your children. And I just want to encourage the parents to be open-minded about that, recognize the importance of the decision with their children, and that their involvement will pay off. Now, the other thing that I want to just, as an introduction, just kind of bring out is what we're really going to talk about in particular with financial aid. A lot of people are a little bit misled in this area. They think that the assistance that's out there for college is primarily through scholarships. And scholarships are out there. There's a lot of emphasis that parents put on scholarships, obtaining scholarships and so forth, but that's not generally what I teach on. It is a part of the process of college planning and reducing the cost, but scholarships only count 1% of the assistance that's out there. 70% of the assistance that's out there for college actually comes from the federal government, and that's what we're going to focus on. So I just really want to address up front, because I know a lot of parents, I hear when I talk to parents about their college savings plans and how they're going to help their children, they'll tell me they're praying for a scholarship. Well, that's not a very fruitful thing, since it's only 1%. 70% of the aid comes from the federal government. The rest of it comes from the college, which we're also going to talk about as well. So the things that we're going to talk about today and over the next week account for 99% of the assistance that's out there for financial aid. 99% of the ways that they can obtain money to reduce the cost of college. So I just kind of want to mention that first, because I know some people kind of emphasize the scholarships. That's one of the things that I get very frustrated with, because I do see a lot of different seminars out there trying to help parents. My son is in that age group. I see what the schools put out. I see what the libraries put out, and scholarships is a big emphasis. And it just not it's important, but it's just not really the most fruitful use of your time with respect to this. Just to begin, I also want to just kind of give you something that I always try to mention whenever I teach on this, and that is that the people who receive the most aid, the most financial aid, the people who receive the most financial aid and pay the least amount for college are not those with the greatest need. The people who receive the most aid and pay the least amount of money for college are not the ones in the greatest need. They're the ones that understand the process. And the way that I like to describe this is maybe with a hotel, or an airplane ticket. Most people recognize that everybody on that airplane or everybody in that hotel did not pay the same amount, depending on where they went, what website they went to, how they went about booking it, and so forth. They're going to pay a different price. And college is very similar. So the people that receive the most aid and pay the least amount for the college are the people who understand the process, not the ones in the greatest need. And so that's really that's the theme of the next today, and then over the next few weeks. Those are the things that we're going to talk about the most with respect to this process, just understanding the process and how it can work for you or not work for you. Now, the first question that usually comes up whenever I talk about financial aid is, how do you determine financial aid? How do you determine financial need? Who makes the decision to decide whether or not your child is going to be eligible or not? Where does that decision come from? That generally is the first question that people talk to me about. They're a little bit confused as far as who makes that decision. Does that decision come from the college, or does it come from something else? So let's talk a little bit about that. And I want to give you an equation. This is a little bit hard. This is a little bit more difficult for me because I'm used to speaking with people using some type of, showing them on the screen. It's going to be a little bit more difficult without my PowerPoint presentation, but let me just try to describe it for you because this is really the starting place. So how do we determine financial need for a student? Who does that? Well, the financial aid equation is FN equals COA minus EFC. And just stay with me. I'll define that. But FN stands for financial need. So a child's financial need is equal to the difference between COA and EFC. COA stands for the cost of attendance. The cost of attendance is the cost of the university. It's going to be different for every university. EFC stands for expected family contribution. So financial need is defined as the difference between the college cost and something we call expected family contribution, EFC. What is EFC? What EFC is a number that's created by a website. It's the process that we know as FAFSA, FAFSA. Stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid. FAFSA is the starting place for financial aid. And we know that the expected family contribution for all families by going to the website for FAFSA. The website for FAFSA is maintained by the Department of Education. So one answer to my initial question is that the government determines financial need. That's where all this stuff comes from. That's why most of the financial aid that's out there is coming from the government, because also it is their rules. But expected family contribution is known by going to the website maintained by the Department of Education, the FAFSA website, and inputting your income and your assets. It's a very similar process to filing your tax return. In fact, you will need your tax return to do it because you will be asked to take the income and the asset information or the dividend income, various things associated with your taxes off of their tax returns to input it on the website. So parents go to this FAFSA website, they input their income, they input their assets, as well as the child's income and assets, and the outcome is the expected family contribution. So financial need is equal to the cost of the college minus this expected family contribution, this number that's produced by the FAFSA process. And what the EFC represents is what the government determines as your ability to pay for your child's college based on your income and your assets. So the financial need is created by looking at the cost of the college minus what the government feels like you can contribute to the financial aid process. And let's just take a break for a minute, and we'll come back and talk about that more. Welcome back. We've been talking about financial aid and this question of financial need. The starting point for understanding how you can obtain assistance for college costs and reducing your cost is by understanding what determines financial need. How we do that? Who does that? How financial need is calculated for financial aid purposes is by looking at the difference between the cost of the college and this thing we call EFC, or expected family contribution. And the expected family contribution is the number that the government determines you should be able to contribute to college based on your income and your assets. And we know this number through the process known as FAFSA, FAFSA, Free Application for Federal Student Aid. This is the starting point for all the financial aid process. It's actually a website maintained by the Department of Education. You go to it, you input your income and your assets. Now, there is a couple other things above financial aid, the FAFSA process, that we're also going to talk about as well. And which comes into play or not depends on the college. And we're going to talk a whole lot more about this later, but there's also something called the profile, which is another application that's used in addition to the FAFSA process that's mainly used for private colleges. And we'll come back to that in a minute. But the starting point is to understand what financial need is. The starting point is to understand how your child will qualify. So if the cost of the college minus your expected family contribution is a positive number, you qualify for financial need. Now, a couple things as a side note that's a little bit different right now. There's actually been some changes in this area. In the past, we always waited until the first of the year when taxes were done to start this process because most of the information that you provided to FAFSA came from your tax return. Now they've made some changes that allow you to start that in October. And they actually put in a 2-year look-back period associated with that. So you don't have to wait until you finish your taxes to do this. So we're coming up on October. So if I've got parents listening right now that have seniors in college, you better get on this stuff. This is something that everybody needs to look at filling out and completing on October the 1st. Because now you don't have to, in the past, you used to have to know the the current year's tax numbers to complete the process. Now they go back 2 years. So you don't have to wait on that anymore. So October 1st is that deadline. Now let's talk about an example. Maybe this will help you a little bit more understand this process. So the financial aid equation, financial needs equal the cost of college minus your expected family contribution. So let me provide you an example of how this might look. Suppose that your child is interested in engineering, and they're looking at a couple different colleges. They're looking at Auburn and MIT. Both of them have engineering schools. Of course, you want them to go to Auburn. How do you decide where you want to steer them? How do you decide what you can afford? Well, this is where financial aid comes in. So let me just run through this a simple example for you of how this might work out for someone. Auburn costs about $10,000 a year. MIT is about $20,000 a year, so it costs twice as much. Now, most people looking at that would think, well, MIT costs twice as much. I'm not sure that we can afford that. So follow along this example with me because I want to show you how this financial aid process will reduce the cost of your college. So Auburn costs $10,000 a year. And for purposes of this example, I'm going to assume that your expected family contribution is $5,000. So you went to the website, you inputted your income, your assets, the outcome was $5,000. And so that is the number that the government considers you able, based on your situation, to contribute to your child's college based on your income and your assets. So of the $10,000 cost of Auburn, the $10,000 of annual cost for Auburn, you should be able to contribute $5,000 to that. So your financial need is the difference between those two. It's $5,000. So $10,000 for the cost of the college, $5,000 for the expected family contribution. Your financial need is $5,000. Now, in contrast, MIT costs twice as much. It is $20,000. So if you subtract your expected family contribution of $5,000, your financial need is $15,000. So it's 3 times the financial need associated in contrast to Auburn. Now, one thing you'll notice is that the expected family contribution did not change. It's actually a constant number for all colleges. So the way the government looks at this is that your ability to pay for a college is the same for every college. So your financial need rises or falls based on the cost of the college. So obviously, the higher the cost, the higher the financial need. Your expected family contribution does not change. So it doesn't matter whether they're going to Auburn or UAB. But the financial need does rise or fall based on the cost of the colleges. Now, the reason why I chose these 2 different colleges is because they have a very different treatment of financial need. Just because you have financial need doesn't mean that you're going to receive a financial package for that entire need. So in this situation, I said that if you went to Auburn, if your child went to Auburn, that you would have a $5,000 financial need. Does that mean that Auburn is going to give you $5,000? It does not. If you went to MIT and you had a $15,000 financial need, does that mean that MIT is going to give you $15,000? It actually does mean that, because there's a big difference between these universities. That's why I picked them for this example. MIT is one of the few colleges in the country that is known for providing for 100% of a child's financial need. So if your child has a financial need, demonstrates a financial need of $15,000, you would expect MIT to provide a $15,000 financial aid package. Auburn, not so much. Auburn is known to provide about 50% of financial need. So if your child was going to Auburn and you demonstrated a $5,000 financial need, you would expect Auburn to provide for about half of that, about $2,500. The other $2,500 is actually going to be your cost, because that need was not met. It's unmet need. Now, the point that I'm trying to make is that the actual cost of college is really what I want you to home in on. What does Auburn cost? Auburn has a tuition rate of $10,000 a year. Is that actually what it costs you? Not necessarily. The true cost of Auburn is actually, let me give you one more formula, and that is the expected family contribution plus the unmet need equals the actual cost of the college. Remember, the expected family contribution was the number that the government considered you able to contribute to your child's college based on your income and your assets. So it's the starting place. It's always the cost associated with college. But in addition to that, in the situation with Auburn, since it only met half of your financial need, the other half you had to pay for. So the unmet need was $2,500. So we had a $5,000 financial need. Auburn met half of that. So there's a $2,500 financial aid package, and then the other $2,500 you had to pay for. So the total cost would be the sum of the two, the expected family contribution plus the unmet need. So the total in this situation would be $7,500. So even though Auburn costs $10,000, your actual cost is $7,500. Now, in contrast with MIT, the cost of MIT is $20,000. Does that mean that is what you pay? It does not. Going back to the formula, expected family contribution plus unmet need equals the total cost of college. In this particular example, we had a $15,000 financial need, $20,000 for the tuition. We had a $5,000 expected family contribution. So the difference, the $15,000, was the child's financial need. Now, I mentioned that MIT was one of the few universities that actually provided 100% of a child's financial need. And in this situation, there's actually, in that situation, they would have a financial package equal to the financial need of $15,000. So there actually would not be any unmet need, as opposed to Auburn, who only provided 50%. So what is the cost of college for MIT? Well, the starting place was the expected family contribution, the number that the government considers you able to spend for your child's college. It's always the starting point. It's always at least going to be the minimum. But the unmet need in the MIT example was zero. So the total cost being the sum of the two, $5,000 plus zero, so the cost of MIT was $5,000. So even though the tuition cost was $20,000, the cost to the parent was actually $5,000, because MIT provided 100% of a child's financial need. So the question becomes, how can you send your child to college at Auburn for $7,500 and then send your child to MIT for $5,000? How is that possible? How can you send your child to a college that costs twice as much for 50% less? And that leads me to my first point, and that is that limiting school choice does not necessarily reduce a parent's share of college cost. Limiting school choice does not necessarily reduce a parent's share of college cost. In order for you to truly understand what the college is going to cost your child, cost you, you've actually got to go through the financial aid process and see what the net result is. And one of the things that you're going to figure out is that not all colleges are created equal. They have a lot of different resources. Some colleges have large endowments. They have a lot of different research grants going on. They have a lot more resources than others. They have a lot of alumni giving. They're very active with that. They have a lot of people that contribute money that can be used as a resource for the student to go to school there. But the biggest factor involved with the different financial aid situation with these different colleges is really a supply and demand. And think of it this way. In this city of Birmingham, if you go to Hoover, Vestavia, Mount Brook, Birmingham, all these different schools, you'll find that about 80% or more of graduating seniors will go to one of two schools, Alabama or Auburn. That means the rest of the students are spread out between all the other colleges in the country. So the Sanfords, the Birmingham Southerns, the Tuskegee, everything else is competing for the share of the 20%. So 80% of the students in this state go to one of two schools. These large public universities, very visible with football teams and so forth. And when you think about that, all the states have very similar situations. Mississippi has Ole Miss, Mississippi State. Florida, FSU, Florida. Most states in this country have these large, very visible public universities that receive the lion's share of the students. So when you think about the supply and demand factor, think of it this way. If you had a business that you had 25,000 customers beating down your door to get in, and you did not have to do a lot to attract them, why would you spend any marketing dollars? It's the same thing with colleges. These colleges, this is a business. So these smaller, more expensive colleges that are not quite as visible, that don't have the football teams and so forth, have to compete. And to compete, they have to provide the dollars. So a school like MIT has to provide resources that Auburn does not provide. And why should they? 20,000, 25,000 students are going to Auburn. Why would they spend money to attract more students? They have more than they can handle. But Sanford is going to have to step forward to provide some financial aid for these students to attract them. So the biggest factor involved with these different choices of colleges is this supply and demand and how much they have to work to attract the student. Now, that pretty much wraps us up for today. We'll pick up with this next week, and everybody have a good week.
You've been listening to Insights with Philip Wilson, an Alabama registered investment advisor. Learn more by visiting his website at ssmistakes.com or by calling 205-868-9297.